Marcus drove slowly through the gates of the new neighborhood, his old but well-kept truck filled with boxes. The morning sun shined bright, making the white houses look even brighter. He had worked hard for years, saved carefully, and finally bought a home he could proudly call his own. It was not the biggest house on the block, but it was his, and that meant everything. He parked in front of his driveway and stepped out, stretching his arms after the long ride. Neighbors across the street peeked out of their windows. Some waved politely, but others simply stared. Marcus noticed but chose to keep smiling. He had promised himself not to let anyone's opinion spoil this new beginning. As he opened the back of his truck and started pulling out boxes, he heard the sound of footsteps behind him. A woman with neatly combed blonde hair and a clipboard in her hand walked quickly toward him. She looked serious, as if she was about to give instructions. "Excuse me," she said in a sharp voice. "What are you doing here?" Marcus turned and smiled. "Good morning. I'm moving in." "This is my house now," the woman frowned. "Your house. This neighborhood is very strict. We don't allow just anyone to move in without proper clearance." She crossed her arms. "I'm Karen, the head of the HOA. I need to see proof before you bring all this inside." Marcus stayed calm. He had heard about homeowners associations and how some people took the rules too seriously. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document. "Here's the deed. I signed the papers last week." Karen glanced at the paper but did not even bother reading it. Instead, she looked at Marcus carefully, as if searching for something wrong. "You know, we value peace and order here. We have certain standards. I just want to make sure everything checks out." Marcus placed the document back into his pocket. "I understand. I'll follow the rules. I just want to settle in and get started." But Karen did not leave. She pulled out her phone and tapped quickly. "I think I'll let the police handle this. It's better if they confirm everything." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You're calling the police because I'm moving into my own house?" Karen lifted her chin. "Yes, we take safety very seriously. It's nothing personal. But until they come, I'd prefer if you stop unloading your boxes." Marcus sighed quietly. He looked around and saw more neighbors watching now. Some whispered to each other. He could feel the weight of their stares. For a moment, frustration bubbled inside him, but he forced himself to breathe slowly. He had faced challenges before. He knew how to stay composed. Minutes passed. Marcus leaned against the truck and waited. He thought about the journey that brought him here. Years of working late shifts, saving money instead of spending it, and pushing through difficulties had finally given him this chance. A home of his own. He would not let this moment be ruined, no matter how unfair it felt. Soon the distant sound of sirens broke the silence. A police car pulled up and parked right in front of Marcus's new driveway. Two officers stepped out, both wearing sunglasses and firm expressions. The neighbors leaned closer to their windows. Karen walked quickly toward the officers, waving her hands as if she had done something heroic. "Officers," she began loudly, "thank you for coming so quickly. This man here is moving things into a house, but I don't believe he belongs here. I want him removed before there's any trouble." The officers looked at Marcus, who stood calmly with his arms at his sides. Marcus nodded politely. "Good morning, officers. I'm Marcus. This is my house. I just moved in today. If you want, I can show you the documents." The officers exchanged a look, then walked closer. One of them extended a hand. "Marcus, right? We know exactly who you are." Karen's face lit up, expecting them to back her up. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of questioning Marcus, both officers straightened their backs. One lifted his hand in a sharp salute. Karen froze in confusion. "What are you doing? Why are you saluting him?" Marcus gave a small smile, though he remained humble. The salute reminded him of another time in his life, a time filled with discipline, sacrifice, and duty. The officers recognized him not as a stranger, but as someone who had given much to serve his country. The neighbors who had been watching through the windows suddenly grew silent. The air felt heavy, waiting for what would happen next. Karen's confident expression slowly faded. She looked from the officers to Marcus, clearly not understanding why her plan was not working. She tapped her clipboard nervously, the authority she carried before now slipping away. Marcus simply stood there, quiet and steady, waiting for the moment to speak. He knew this was only the beginning of his new life in this neighborhood, and this first day would be remembered for a long time. The salute from the officers stunned everyone. Karen stood frozen, her mouth slightly open as if she had lost her voice. The neighbors who had been whispering behind their curtains now leaned closer, trying to understand what they were seeing. For a moment, the entire street was silent except for the birds singing in the trees. Marcus nodded politely at the officers. He did not show off or speak loudly. He simply gave a calm smile, as if he had been through moments far greater than this one. One officer, whose name tag read Officer James, lowered his hand after the salute and said firmly, "It is an honor to meet you again, sir." Karen blinked. "Again? What do you mean again? He just showed up here today." The other officer, Officer Miller, looked at her with a steady expression. "Ma'am, do you realize who you just called us on? This man is a decorated veteran. He served this country with distinction. He's more than welcome in any neighborhood." The words hit Karen harder than she expected. She stepped back a little, her confidence shaken. The clipboard she held tightly against her chest now looked more like a shield she was hiding behind. Marcus finally spoke, his voice calm and steady. "Thank you, officers. I appreciate your respect. I just want to move into my home and start fresh here." Officer James turned to the watching neighbors, raising his voice so they could all hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, this man has earned the right to peace and dignity. He put his life on the line for people he never even met. If anyone deserves a warm welcome, it's him." The curtains that had been half open suddenly closed. Some neighbors felt ashamed for watching silently while Karen tried to stop Marcus from moving in. Others felt guilty for doubting him without knowing anything about him. Karen swallowed hard. "I didn't know. I was only trying to keep order in the neighborhood. We have rules." Marcus looked at her, his gaze firm but not unkind. "Rules are important, but so is respect. You could have asked kindly instead of assuming I don't belong." Karen opened her mouth to reply, but no words came out. For the first time, she felt the weight of her own actions pressing on her. The officers did not linger. They shook Marcus's hand with respect and gave him their contact information in case he needed assistance settling in. Then they left, leaving behind an atmosphere that was heavier than before. Marcus turned back to his truck. He lifted another box and carried it toward the front door. His movements were steady, as if nothing had happened. But inside, he knew this first encounter with his new neighborhood would not be forgotten easily. From across the street, an elderly man stepped out of his porch. His hair was gray and his steps slow, but his eyes were kind. He walked carefully toward Marcus and offered a small smile. "Son, welcome to the neighborhood. My name is Robert. If you need help carrying boxes, I can try. My back isn't what it used to be, but I'll do what I can." Marcus's heart softened. He had expected coldness from everyone, but here was a neighbor offering warmth. He shook Robert's hand firmly. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Even your words mean a lot." Soon another family from the corner house came walking up. A woman named Maria carried a tray with 2 bottles of water, while her young son held a basket with snacks. "We saw what happened," Maria said softly. "We're sorry you had to go through that on your first day. Please have some water and something to eat while you unpack." Marcus smiled with genuine gratitude. "That's very kind. Thank you. This makes the work a little easier." The small acts of kindness began to change the atmosphere. Some neighbors who had hidden behind their curtains now felt encouraged to step outside. A few waved. Others introduced themselves quickly, and slowly the silence that once felt heavy began to break. Karen, however, stayed near the sidewalk, pretending to check her clipboard again and again. She wanted to walk away, but her pride would not allow her to leave completely. She watched as Marcus gained support, feeling her control over the situation slipping away. Marcus continued carrying boxes into the house. Every step reminded him that this home was more than just a building. It was a symbol of his hard work, his sacrifices, and his future. He thought of the years he spent overseas, the nights he went without sleep, the moments of danger he faced. All of it had led him here to this quiet street where he wanted nothing more than peace. As the sun began to set, Marcus finally placed the last box inside. He stood in the doorway, looking out at the neighbors who had gathered around. Some clapped gently, others gave him encouraging words. It was not the grand welcome he imagined, but it was real. It showed him that not everyone in the neighborhood saw him as an outsider. Karen finally spoke again, her voice lower this time. "I suppose I was wrong. Maybe I judged too quickly." Marcus nodded, his tone even. "We all make mistakes. What matters is..." The next morning, Marcus woke early. Sunlight came through the windows, falling across the boxes stacked neatly in the living room. He stretched his arms and smiled. The house felt quiet but full of promise. He had so much work to do, yet the thought of arranging everything filled him with energy. After making a simple breakfast, he stepped outside to check the yard. The neighborhood was calm. Birds sang from the trees and a soft breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass. Across the street, Robert, the elderly neighbor who had welcomed him yesterday, waved from his porch. "Morning, Marcus," Robert called. "How's the first night in your new home?" Marcus smiled and waved back. "It was peaceful, thank you." "I'm glad to be here," Robert nodded. "Good to hear. If you need tools or anything, my shed is full of them. Don't hesitate to ask." Such kindness warmed Marcus's heart. He had not expected friendship so soon, especially after the tense scene the day before. He looked around and noticed Maria walking with her son, carrying a bag of groceries. When she saw Marcus, she gave a friendly smile. Her son waved enthusiastically. "Good morning," Maria said. "I hope you're settling in." "I am," Marcus replied. "Thank you again for your kindness yesterday. It meant a lot." Maria shook her head. "You don't need to thank us. Everyone deserves to feel welcome in their own home." Before Marcus could reply, the sound of high heels clicked on the pavement. Karen was walking toward them, her clipboard once again tucked under her arm. She wore a stiff smile, as if she were forcing herself to look polite. "Good morning," she said quickly. "I just wanted to stop by and make sure everything is in order. Our HOA has certain rules about lawn care, trash pickup, and house colors. We don't want any surprises." Marcus listened patiently. "I understand. I'll review the rules and follow them." Karen's eyes darted toward Robert and Maria, who were both standing close to Marcus. She seemed uneasy that they were already supporting him. "Well, that's good. We just have to keep everything neat and proper here. I'll be watching to make sure." Robert frowned slightly but said nothing. Maria crossed her arms, clearly unimpressed with Karen's tone. Marcus remained calm. He had learned long ago that patience often spoke louder than anger. Later in the day, Marcus began working on the front yard. He trimmed the bushes, swept the driveway, and started planting a few flowers near the porch. Neighbors passing by slowed their steps, curious to see what he was doing. Some gave polite nods, others simply watched. By afternoon, a small group of children rode their bikes down the street and stopped near his yard. One of them, a boy with messy hair, called out, "Hey, mister, are you really a soldier?" Marcus wiped his forehead with a towel and smiled at them. "I used to be. Now I'm just your neighbor." The children looked amazed. "That's so cool," one girl said. "My dad told me soldiers are heroes." Marcus crouched down so he was closer to their height. "Heroes come in many forms. Sometimes being a good neighbor is just as important." The children grinned and rode off, shouting excitedly. Their laughter echoed down the street, and Marcus felt a warmth in his chest. He had always believed respect had to be earned, and he hoped little by little he was showing this community who he really was. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Robert invited Marcus over for a cup of tea on his porch. The two men sat quietly for a while, watching the street grow darker. Finally, Robert spoke. "You know, Marcus, yesterday could have gone badly. Karen has a way of stirring things up. She likes control. But the way you handled it with calm and dignity, well, it made people see you in a different light." Marcus nodded slowly. "I don't want conflict. I came here for peace. But I won't let anyone take away my right to be here." Robert's eyes shined with respect. "That's the spirit. People will notice. Some may take time to change their views, but you'll win them over." As they talked, Karen passed by again, pretending to be on an evening walk. She glanced at them, her expression unreadable. Robert leaned closer to Marcus and whispered, "Don't be surprised if she tries something again. She's not used to losing control." Marcus gave a calm smile. "If she does, I'll be ready. I've faced tougher battles." Inside his heart, Marcus felt stronger than ever. He was not just moving boxes into a house. He was building a life here, one step at a time. He knew the road ahead would not be simple, but he had already survived worse storms. As night settled, the stars appeared above the rooftops. Marcus stood in his yard, breathing in the cool air. He thought about the officers saluting him, the kindness of Robert and Maria, and even the challenges Karen brought. Each moment reminded him of something important. This was more than a house. It was a place where his story would continue, and Marcus was determined to make it a story worth remembering. The next week brought new rhythms to Marcus's life. Every morning he rose early, made coffee, and worked on organizing his home. He hung pictures on the walls, built shelves in the garage, and planted flowers along the walkway. Little by little, the house began to look alive. Not just a place with boxes, but a home with warmth. Neighbors who passed by noticed the changes. Some waved more often now, while others stopped for small conversations. Marcus always greeted them kindly, answering questions and sharing a smile. Even those who had once stared silently now seemed curious in a friendlier way. One afternoon, Maria stopped by with her son, bringing a basket of fresh bread. "We baked extra," she said with a cheerful smile. "I thought you might enjoy some." Marcus accepted it gratefully. "Thank you, Maria. You and your family have been so kind. It makes me feel welcome." Her son, who was holding a toy truck, asked shyly, "Can I see your garden, Mr. Marcus?" Marcus chuckled and nodded. "Of course. Let me show you." He guided them to the small patch of soil near the porch where he had planted flowers. The boy bent down, pointing at the bright petals. "They look happy." Marcus knelt beside him. "Plants are like people. If you take care of them, they grow strong." Maria watched quietly, touched by how gentle Marcus was. She realized that behind his strong figure was a man with patience and kindness. Meanwhile, Karen was not happy with what she saw. She stood across the street pretending to check her mailbox, but her eyes stayed fixed on Marcus's yard. She could see how neighbors were slowly warming to him. Each friendly exchange felt like a loss of her control. Later that evening, Karen called for an HOA meeting. A few neighbors gathered in the community hall, curious about the sudden notice. She stood at the front with her clipboard, speaking in her usual sharp tone. "We need to talk about new residents," Karen began. "This neighborhood has rules, and if we are not careful, people might change the way things are done here." Some neighbors shifted uncomfortably. One man asked, "Are you talking about Marcus? He seems like a good man. He's been fixing his yard and keeping everything neat." Karen forced a smile. "Appearances can be deceiving. We need to make sure all rules are followed. If we let small things slide now, later we will regret it." Robert, who was sitting in the back, spoke up firmly. "I think Marcus has followed every rule. He's shown respect. Maybe instead of searching for problems, we should welcome him properly." Karen's face tightened. She did not expect someone to speak against her. "Robert, I understand your opinion, but as the HOA leader, it is my duty to protect this community." Robert shook his head. "Protecting the community doesn't mean making people feel unwelcome. Marcus has already proven he belongs here." The room grew quiet. Some nodded in agreement with Robert, while others avoided Karen's eyes. It was clear that not everyone supported her strict view anymore. Back at his home, Marcus was unaware of the meeting. He was in his kitchen, unpacking another box of dishes. As he worked, he thought about how each day felt brighter than the last. The tension of his first day still lingered, but the kindness from some neighbors gave him hope. The following morning, Marcus decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. He greeted people along the way, waved at children playing, and even helped a woman pick up groceries she had dropped. These simple acts did more to change hearts than arguments ever could. When he returned home, Robert was waiting on the porch with a newspaper. "Marcus, good timing," Robert said. "There's something I think you should know." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" Robert explained about the meeting the night before. He told Marcus how Karen tried to stir doubt, but how many neighbors disagreed with her. "People are starting to see her ways more clearly," Robert said. "And they're starting to see your character too." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "I don't want to cause division. I just want to live in peace," Robert smiled. "Sometimes peace comes when people stand together for what is right. You're already making a difference without even trying." Marcus thanked him and walked inside, reflecting on the words. He realized that his presence alone was changing the balance of the neighborhood. He was not just a new resident anymore. He was becoming part of the story of this place. That evening, as the sun set in shades of gold, Marcus sat on his porch with a cup of tea. Across the street, children laughed as they played, and neighbors chatted near their driveways. For the first time since he arrived, the street felt alive with warmth. But Marcus also noticed Karen standing near her yard, watching silently. Her arms were crossed, and her eyes held a mix of frustration and uncertainty. He knew she was not finished. She would likely try again to push him out or prove shy. Days passed, and Marcus's life in the neighborhood began to settle into a rhythm. He worked on fixing small things inside his home, greeted neighbors when he saw them, and took peaceful evening walks. Slowly, the quiet stares from windows turned into waves and friendly nods. Children riding bicycles often shouted his name, and some adults stopped to chat with him about gardening or home repairs. But not everyone was pleased with this change. Karen, the head of the HOA, felt her grip on the community slipping. For years, she had set the tone, and most neighbors had followed her rules without question. Now Marcus was winning hearts not through speeches or power, but through kindness and patience. That unsettled her. One morning, Marcus woke to the sound of knocking at his door. When he opened it, Karen stood there holding a stack of papers. Her expression was serious, but her voice tried to sound polite. "Good morning," she said. "I thought I should bring you the HOA guidelines in detail. It is very important that every resident follows them closely." Marcus accepted the papers with a calm smile. "Thank you. I'll read them and make sure I understand everything." Karen narrowed her eyes slightly. She had expected resistance, but his politeness gave her no reason to argue. "Well, I'll be checking regularly. We like everything neat here." After she left, Marcus set the papers on the table. He glanced at the long list of rules, some reasonable, some unnecessarily strict. He sighed, but reminded himself that following the rules would give Karen fewer reasons to cause trouble. Later that day, Marcus was working on fixing a loose step on his porch when Robert came walking over with his cane. "I saw Karen leaving your place earlier," Robert said. "She give you another lecture," Marcus chuckled softly. "She dropped off the HOA guidelines." "I'll follow them. No need to give her extra fuel." Robert nodded. "Smart. She thrives on conflict, but you don't give her the chance." As they talked, Maria came by carrying a plate of cookies. "Just a little something for you," she said warmly. "We know moving in is a lot of work." Marcus thanked her, touched again by her kindness. They sat together on the porch, eating cookies and sharing stories. Robert spoke about his younger days. Maria shared funny moments with her children, and Marcus listened, smiling often. For the first time, it felt like true friendship was forming. But across the street, Karen watched them from her window. The sight of neighbors gathering at Marcus's porch unsettled her even more. She wanted control, yet here he was, winning loyalty without trying. She tapped her clipboard and muttered to herself, determined to find another way. The very next day, Karen called another HOA meeting. This time, more neighbors attended, curious about what she would say. She stood in front of them with her usual stern look. "Everyone," she began, "we must be cautious. New residents should not change the atmosphere of our neighborhood. Rules must be respected. We cannot allow exceptions." A younger neighbor, David, raised his hand. "Karen, with respect, Marcus has followed the rules so far. He even keeps his yard neater than most of us." Others nodded in agreement. Another neighbor added, "He's polite and helpful. Yesterday he carried my groceries when my bag tore. He's the kind of person we should want here." Karen's face tightened. She tried to argue, but her words were losing strength. "Appearances can fool people," she insisted. "We must stay careful." Robert stood up slowly, leaning on his cane. "No, Karen, what fools people is fear and suspicion. Marcus has shown nothing but respect. If anything, he's setting an example for the rest of us." The room filled with murmurs of agreement. Karen realized she was outnumbered, but she refused to admit defeat. She ended the meeting quickly, her cheeks flushed with frustration. Back at home, Marcus was once again unaware of the meeting. He spent the afternoon hanging curtains and unpacking old photo albums. As he held the pictures, memories of his service came rushing back. He thought of the long nights overseas, the friends he had made, and the sacrifices they had all endured. Moving into this neighborhood felt like the reward for all of it. Peace at last, or at least the chance for peace. That evening, Robert came by again and told Marcus what had happened at the meeting. Marcus listened quietly, then shook his head. "I don't want to cause division, but I'm grateful people spoke up." Robert smiled. "They spoke up because they see your character. You didn't have to defend yourself. Your actions already did." As the night grew darker, Marcus stepped outside once more, looking at the quiet street under the glow of the streetlights. He could hear the soft voices of neighbors chatting, the laughter of children still playing, and the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. For the first time, he felt like this street was beginning to feel like home. But he also knew Karen would not stop easily. Her pride and need for control would push her to try again. Marcus sighed, steadying his heart. He had faced storms before, and if another one came, he would meet it with the same patience and dignity that had carried him through so much already. A few days later, Marcus decided it was time to visit the local community center. He had heard from Robert that many neighbors gathered there for weekly activities like book clubs, exercise groups, and volunteer planning. Marcus wanted to meet more people outside the small circle he already knew. When he entered the building, heads turned. Some people recognized him from the incident with the police, while others only knew him as the new resident on the street. Marcus gave a friendly smile to everyone and walked to the registration desk. "I'm Marcus," he said kindly. "I just moved into the neighborhood. I'd like to know more about the activities here." The receptionist beamed. "Welcome, Marcus. We have a gardening group, a volunteer team that helps with local schools and fitness classes. You're welcome to join any of them." Before Marcus could reply, Karen appeared from the corner of the room. She was carrying her usual clipboard and wore a stiff smile. "Oh, Marcus," she said in a voice that was too sweet to be real. "I didn't expect to see you here. Are you sure you're ready for this kind of involvement? You've only just moved in?" Marcus kept his voice calm. "Community is built step by step. I'd like to do my part." Karen's smile tightened. "Well, as long as you don't disrupt the balance we already have." Some neighbors frowned at her tone. A man named Daniel stepped forward and shook Marcus's hand. "Ignore that, Marcus. We're glad you're here. We can always use more hands in the garden group." The room warmed with laughter and chatter as more people introduced themselves. Marcus felt encouraged. He listened carefully, asked questions, and made notes about volunteer opportunities. His calm presence seemed to make others relax. Even those who had been uncertain about him began to see his sincerity. Karen stood to the side, watching the scene unfold. Each handshake Marcus received made her jaw tighten. It was becoming clear that her attempts to isolate him were failing. Later that afternoon, Marcus joined the gardening group behind the center. They were planting flowers along the walkway. He rolled up his sleeves, picked up a shovel, and began working beside them. The neighbors noticed how he never tried to take control, but simply followed instructions, smiling and chatting as he worked. One woman whispered to another, "He's not what Karen made him sound like. He's polite and hardworking." By the time the sun set, Marcus had dirt on his hands and sweat on his forehead, but also genuine smiles from his fellow neighbors. They thanked him for helping and invited him to return next week. When Marcus walked back home, Robert was waiting on the porch. "I heard you went to the community center," Robert said with a proud smile. "That's a smart move. People will see your true nature more and more." Marcus sat beside him, nodding. It felt good. Being part of something bigger makes me feel at home. Robert leaned on his cane. "That's how you win over a neighborhood. Not with arguments, but with actions." As the days passed, Marcus's reputation grew quietly. Children often stopped to greet him. Adults waved, and some even came to ask for advice on small repairs. He always helped with patience, never expecting anything in return, but Karen was growing restless. One evening, she stood in her kitchen, flipping through the HOA rulebook. She muttered under her breath, determined to find even the smallest mistake Marcus might have made. Finally, she spotted something. According to the guidelines, every resident was required to paint their mailbox in the approved neighborhood color. Marcus's mailbox was still plain black. The next morning, Karen marched across the street with her clipboard. She knocked firmly on Marcus's door. When he opened it, she pointed toward his mailbox. "Marcus, I'm afraid you're in violation of HOA rules. Your mailbox does not match the approved color. This must be fixed immediately." Marcus looked at the mailbox, then back at Karen. He stayed calm. "I didn't realize. Thank you for pointing it out. I'll take care of it this week." Karen blinked, almost disappointed at his easy acceptance. She had hoped for resistance, something she could use against him. Instead, Marcus's calm reply left her with nothing to argue. That evening, Marcus went to the hardware store, bought the approved paint, and the next morning, he painted the mailbox neatly. When neighbors saw him working, some offered to help, but he politely declined. "It's a small task," he said with a smile. "I can handle it." When Karen passed by later, she froze. The mailbox was perfect, painted exactly as required. Marcus looked at her and gave a polite nod. "All done. Thank you again for..." The weekend brought a special event to the neighborhood. Every year, the community hosted a block party where families shared food, played music, and children ran around with laughter. Marcus had heard about it from Maria and Robert, and they encouraged him to attend. You should come, Maria said with a smile. It's the best time to meet everyone at once. Bring something to share, even if it's simple. People will appreciate it. Marcus nodded. He wasn't much of a cook, but he decided to make a large fruit salad. It was fresh, colorful, and something everyone could enjoy. On the day of the party, he carried the bowl to the park where tables were lined with dishes. The air smelled of grilled food, sweet pastries, and spices from different cultures. Children darted between the adults, laughter echoing through the park. Neighbors greeted each other warmly. Marcus placed his fruit salad on the table and looked around. He noticed Karen near the front talking to a group of residents. She glanced at Marcus and quickly turned away, whispering to the group. Still, Marcus stayed calm. He walked over to where some children were playing with a ball. When they accidentally kicked it toward him, he caught it easily and tossed it back with a smile. Soon the kids invited him to join their game. The sight of Marcus laughing and playing with the children made several parents smile approvingly. Robert watched from a bench, his cane resting at his side. He leaned toward Maria and whispered, "Look at him. He fits right in. Karen won't like this one bit." At the food tables, neighbors began to notice Marcus's fruit salad. The bright colors and fresh taste drew compliments. "This is delicious," one woman said. "Who brought it?" When someone pointed to Marcus, she nodded with approval. "He really thought about everyone." "That's thoughtful." Karen, however, was not pleased. She had planned to use the block party as another chance to isolate Marcus. She had whispered to her friends that he was probably only pretending to be friendly. But as she watched him laughing with children and sharing food, her words lost weight. People were clearly enjoying his presence. When it came time for speeches, Karen, as the HOA president, stood with her clipboard. She gave a short welcome and reminded everyone of the rules for noise, trash, and lawn care. Her words were polite, but her tone was stiff. After her, Daniel, one of the gardening leaders, stepped up to thank volunteers. He paused, then turned to Marcus. "And a special thanks to Marcus for helping us at the community center this week. He worked hard with us in the garden, and we're glad to have him here." Applause broke out. Marcus felt warmth in his chest as people clapped and smiled at him. He nodded modestly, not used to such attention. Karen's smile faltered. She quickly ended the speeches and announced that the music and games would continue. But no matter how she tried, the energy of the event drifted toward Marcus. People gathered around him asking about his work, his background, and even offering him future invitations. Later in the evening, as the sky turned golden, a small stage was set for music. A neighbor played guitar while children danced. Marcus sat with Robert and Maria, enjoying the cheerful scene. A man he hadn't met before approached and sat beside him. "I'm Thomas," the man said kindly. "I'm a police officer here in town. I was actually one of the officers who came when Karen called that day." Marcus raised his eyebrows. "Oh, I remember. You stood back while the other officer spoke." Thomas nodded. "Yes, I wanted to say something then, but the salute said enough." "We knew who you were, Marcus. We knew your record of service. I just want you to know we're glad to have you in this neighborhood." Marcus shook his hand firmly. "Thank you. That means a lot." As Thomas walked away, Robert chuckled softly. "Even the officers are standing with you. Karen won't be able to fight against respect like that." The evening ended with fireworks. Families cheered as colors filled the night sky. Children sat on blankets, their eyes wide with wonder. Marcus stood among them, watching the bursts of light reflect in their faces. Karen stood on the edge of the crowd, her arms crossed. For the first time, she felt her control slipping. Her warnings, her rules, her whispered doubts were losing power. Neighbors were seeing Marcus for who he truly was, not the image she tried to paint. As the last firework faded, Marcus looked around at the smiling faces. He felt a deep peace. Despite the challenges, he was part of this community now. He had earned trust not with words alone, but with patience, kindness, and action. That night, as he walked home with Robert and Maria, Marcus thought to himself, "This is only the start. Respect is not given, it is earned, and I will keep earning it." The days after the block party felt different in the neighborhood. Marcus noticed more neighbors waving when he passed by, more smiles exchanged, and even children running up to greet him. It was clear that the block party had changed something. The walls of suspicion were fading, replaced by growing trust. One morning, as Marcus was watering the flowers in his front yard, Daniel came walking over with a small basket of tomatoes from the community garden. "Thought you might like some of these," Daniel said warmly. "And by the way, We'd like you to lead one of the small projects next week at the center. You've got a good way with people." Marcus accepted the basket with gratitude. "Thank you, Daniel. I'd be happy to help." Across the street, Karen watched from her porch. Her grip on her clipboard tightened as she saw yet another neighbor embrace Marcus. For years, she had been the voice of authority in the neighborhood. Now it felt like her control was slipping away. That afternoon, she called an emergency HOA meeting. Only a handful of her closest supporters showed up. Karen spoke firmly. "We cannot allow Marcus to take over. He may look polite, but we do not know his real intentions. If we let this continue, the order of this neighborhood will be at risk." One man shifted uncomfortably. "Karen, with all respect, Marcus hasn't done anything wrong. He's followed the rules, even fixed his mailbox right away. People like him, maybe we should let things be." Karen's eyes flashed with frustration. "You are all blind. He is gaining influence, and soon he will be telling us how to run things." But her supporters exchanged uneasy glances. The seeds of doubt in her leadership had already been planted. Meanwhile, Marcus kept working quietly. He joined the gardening group again, helped repaint a fence at the community center, and even organized a small toy drive for children. Every step he took made people trust him more. One evening, the police officer Thomas returned to visit. He stopped by Marcus's house and shook his hand. "Marcus, I thought you should know. The story of what happened that day when Karen called us has been spreading. People in town are talking about it. They're not seeing you as a stranger anymore. They're seeing you as an example of patience and strength." Marcus smiled humbly. "I didn't do anything special. I just tried to stay calm." Thomas shook his head. "Sometimes staying calm is the most powerful thing." A week later, the community held another meeting, this time at the center, open to everyone. Karen, as usual, stood at the front with her clipboard ready to speak. But when the meeting began, something unexpected happened. Daniel raised his hand. "Before we start with the rules, I'd like to say something. Many of us have noticed the efforts of our new neighbor, Marcus. He's helped in the garden with the children, and even organized a toy drive. I believe it's time we show our support and thank him for joining us." The room filled with applause. Karen froze, her face stiff. She tried to interrupt, but Robert, sitting with his cane, spoke firmly. "For years, this neighborhood has been about control and fear. But Marcus has shown us that kindness builds stronger bonds than rules alone. I think we should all remember that." The applause grew louder. People turned toward Marcus, clapping and smiling. He stood, slightly embarrassed but grateful. "Thank you," he said softly. "I only wanted to be part of this community, not against it." "I will continue to do my part," Karen's voice cut in sharply. "This meeting is about rules, not applause. We cannot forget that order must be maintained." But this time, no one responded. Her words fell into silence. People looked away, some shaking their heads. It was clear the balance had shifted. The community was no longer following Karen's lead. After the meeting, as people gathered around Marcus, Karen walked quickly out of the room. Her clipboard hung loosely at her side, her steps heavy. For the first time, she felt powerless. Back at home, Marcus sat on his porch with Robert and Maria. The night air was cool, and the stars shone above. Maria poured tea for them, and Robert leaned back in his chair, smiling. "You see, Marcus," Robert said gently, "you didn't just move into a house. You moved into people's hearts. That's something Karen never understood. Authority can control, but respect must be earned. You earned it." Marcus looked around at the quiet street, the homes glowing warmly with lights, the sound of children still laughing in the distance. He felt a sense of belonging he had not expected when he first arrived. He turned to Robert and Maria. "I am grateful for you both. You believed in me when others doubted. That gave me strength." Maria smiled warmly. "Sometimes one person needs to stand beside you so you can stand tall before everyone else." The three of them sat together, sipping tea, while the neighborhood around them settled into peace. Marcus knew challenges might come again, but he also knew that he was no longer facing them alone. For the first time since moving in, Marcus felt not just accepted,